Exposed. The incredible transformation my daughter-in-law surprised me with after 30 days away. Carol stared out the window, watching the world rush by, a blur of energy and vibrancy that felt so alien to her. It had been 6 months since George's passing, and with each day that followed, the world seemed to honor youth while she felt increasingly invisible. "You're just not as relevant anymore," she muttered under her breath, echoing the sentiments of her well-meaning but dismissive family members who insisted she should just embrace her golden years. But all Carol felt was a deep well of loneliness, shadows creeping in on her like a suffocating shroud. The arrival of Emily sent jolts of excitement and anxiety through her. Emily, her son's wife, with her bohemian aesthetics and driven enthusiasm, seemed poised to disrupt Carol's meticulously curated solitude. This summer was meant for her, a chance to reclaim herself through the fading echoes of her husband's sketches hidden in the attic. Yet as the days passed, Emily's ambition began creeping into Carol's life, art supplies infiltrating spaces where quietude once reigned. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Carol's heart raced as she struggled to embrace her own creativity, while being overshadowed by Emily South's relentless drive. Family art nights, once a sprinkle of joy, now morphed into a pressure cooker of expectations and buried fears. Each brushstroke felt like a competition. Each blast of laughter from Emily tightened the knots in her chest. Were they truly bonding, or was Carol merely a backdrop for Emily's artistic aspirations? But the revelation that sent her spiraling was the discovery of George's old sketches mingled within Emily's pieces. Why would you use those? The sketchbook, a sacred relic, felt tainted. Instead of pride, a wave of insecurity crashed over her. It was as if Emily was weaving George's memory into her ambitious plans, and it left Carol reeling, an outcast in her own narrative. The thoughts gnawed at her. Was Emily trying to replace him? To take the scraps of his legacy for a personal venture? Her family's disapproval only added to the brewing storm. Dismissive comments about the frivolity of art weighed heavily on her heart. Why can't she just focus on something practical? They simply did not understand the urgency of Emily's dreams, but neither did they comprehend the haunting fears Carol now grappled with. What if her support for Emily put her own identity at risk? The brimming chaos in her mind spun into confusion as the summer heat grew unbearable, so did the tension between them. At the exhibition, the stakes seemed impossibly high. Carol teetered on the edge of indecision, feeling fractured and raw. Would she advocate for Emily and her passion, stepping into the light herself, or retreat into the shadows, consumed by fear of being replaced in a world that only seemed to celebrate the new and vibrant? The choice loomed and the air crackled with possibility. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the canvas that sprawled across the makeshift exhibition space. Carol's fingers fidgeted, her mind racing as voices filled her ears, a symphony of excitement and praise directed solely at Emily's work. Each compliment felt like a dagger that pierced her heart, igniting her insecurities anew. She was caught in a whirlwind of admiration for Emily, for her talent and spirit, intertwined with a gnawing jealousy that branded her thoughts. "Mom, look at this one. I used your father's sketches as inspiration." Emily's bright voice broke through the noise, drawing Carol's attention to the piece hanging prominently on the front wall. The colors were vibrant, swirling like a storm, yet all Carol could focus on were the faint, barely there lines that mapped George's original designs beneath. The haunting reminder of a man she cherished now sat swallowed in Emily's exuberance, a complex amalgamation of love, loss, and betrayals that bubbled under the surface. "Beautiful, Emily," Carol managed, forcing the words out, but they felt brittle in her mouth, lacking the sincerity they warranted. A flicker of disappointment crossed Emily's face, quickly masked by her signature smile, but Carol noticed. With a pang of guilt, she took a step back, considering the implications of her reaction. Was she allowing grief to rob her daughter-in-law of her success? Did her reverence for George's memory grant her the insidious right to stifle Emily's creativity? Still, the doubts gnawed at her as the evening progressed. She watched as guests drifted toward Emily's pieces, their laughter mingling with the clinking of wine glasses, while Carol stood in the corner, an observer sidelined in her own life. It became painfully clear she had not just stood still, she had become a ghost in this beautiful display of art, overshadowed by the living vibrancy of her memories and the beautiful new life Emily was creating. Frustration flared within her. She balled her fists, breathing deeply to anchor herself. It was time to confront not just Emily but also the destructive narrative she had been telling herself. Yet how could she? What words could she summon to express what felt too convoluted to articulate? "You know, Carol, you should paint something too," a family member suggested, oblivious to the turmoil within. "You've got your husband's talent. You could contribute something worthwhile in that space." The comment struck hard, as if exposing a raw nerve. Contribute? Were her talents only a measure of comparison, a way to fill the void left by George? The juxtaposition of their expectations fueled an inner fire that forced her to rethink her role in this unfolding narrative. Could she step into the light, not to overshadow Emily, but to amplify them both? The evening dragged on, but the haze of uncertainty began to clear. Carol realized she had a choice. She could reclaim her rightful place not as a parent eclipsing a child's dreams, but as a woman reawakening her own artistic expression, intimate and distinct. In that moment, sitting on the precipice of self-doubt, a flicker of resolve ignited within her. "Emily," Carol called, beckoning her daughter-in-law over with a newfound determination. "Perhaps it's time we collaborated. Let George inspire both of us. I want to create something together." Emily's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and excitement lighting up her face. "Really? You mean it? We can incorporate your style with mine." The tension that had defined their summer began to morph into potential. As they discussed ideas, Carol felt the weight of her internal struggles soften. They would honor George together not as isolated tributaries, but as two distinct artists merging in homage to a man whose memory still burned bright. Yet, as plans unfolded between them, a lingering doubt whispered in Carol's mind. What if this collaboration unearthed deeper secrets consumed in unspoken fears? The moment of clarity surged within her, but uncertainty lingered just beneath the surface. How could she confront her fears of vulnerability while simultaneously embracing her artistic revival? Just as the possibility of liberation dawned, another nagging thought emerged. What if this new journey threatened to shatter the fragile bond she feared to disrupt? The path she had chosen carried with it the potential for not just collaboration but confrontation. The air thickened with tension. Could she dare to face those fears head-on? Carol stood beneath the dim glow of the hanging light fixtures, her heart racing with the possibilities that lay ahead. The studio had always been a sanctuary for her and George, an enclave where creativity intertwined with their love. Now it held promise and uncertainty, a chance to reclaim not just her brush but her identity. "Let us set goals," she suggested, her voice steadier than she felt. "What do you envision for us? Do you want to explore the sketches? Or do you prefer to forge new dimensions altogether?" Emily contemplated for a moment. "I think starting with your dad's designs is a great foundation. We can build something fresh with those echoes. It's meaningful, right?" Carol's heart tightened at the thought. The designs held memories, moments frozen in time that Mrs. Spencer, a fellow artist and mentor, would often encourage Carol to confront. But now they seemed both a blessing and a curse. If they dipped into George's legacy, could she unravel the weight that had long confined her? "Right," she said, striving to mask her trepidation. "Let us dive into those sketches. How about we meet here every Saturday morning and share our progress?" "Perfect. I'm so excited," Emily replied, her enthusiasm a balm against Carol's rising fears. As they carved out their weekends for artistic exploration, Carol felt the gentle stirrings of inspiration come alive within her. She began to retrieve her old sketches, dusting off the pages filled with color and emotion. However, the act of revisiting her work unveiled unshed tears, a catharsis reflecting the loss of George not just for her but also for the partnership they had once been in those first few sessions. As brushes glided across canvas, Carol discovered how easily she could dissolve into self-doubt. The bright strokes Emily made seemed to overshadow any effort Carol mustered, warping her vision of collaboration into a twisted reflection of comparison. "Can we mix styles more?" Carol asked one day, her voice timid. I feel like I'm losing my voice somewhere in this. Emily paused, her face pinching with concern. I thought we were going for a blend, but I don't want you to feel like you have to conform. The unease between them simmered, a tension thickening with each exchanged glance. Carol wanted to scream, "This isn't about you." But the words stuck to the back of her throat. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, the pulse of anxiety took over and silenced her. The next week, Carol found a small note in her favorite sketchbook, hidden neatly between the pages. It was a reminder from George, a message scrawled in his handwriting from the time when they had first joining their creativity. Art reflects the soul. Don't let fear quiet your voice. Staring at the words, she felt them burrow deeper into her. It was not just a calling to create but a charge to be herself, to stand firm against the shadows that loomed each time she picked up a brush. This was not solely about Emily's success. It was an opportunity for both of them to evolve. When their next meeting arrived, Carol took a breath. "I want to paint the emotions beneath the designs," she asserted, her voice stronger. "My fear isn't about not being good enough. It's about risking everything to truly express myself." Emily blinked, processing her vulnerability. "That's what will make this collaboration wonderful. We have different lights to share, let us bring them out in the pieces." As they began to explore the depths of their creative partnership, the air thrummed with potential. Yet doubts lingered in the corners of Carol's mind, urging her to consider the fragility of their bond once they began to delve deeper. What if the merging of their artistic spirits frayed the fabric of their relationship? With determination, she pressed on. There was something exhilarating about confronting her fears, inviting Emily into a world of raw emotion. And then she realized, amid the joy and thrill of their process, that her greatest antagonist was the insidious voice of self-doubt she had lulled for too long. It was time for confrontation, not just with Emily or their artistic endeavor, but with the specter of George's memory that lingered in her mind, demanding resolution. Would Carol find the strength to navigate the dense fog of nostalgia? Or would she remain ensnared, paralyzed by the ghosts of her past? As the brush danced across the canvas, she felt her heart swell with possibilities. The pressure to create tethered firmly to her need to explore the truth of her artistic spirit. And just as she was beginning to see a path forward, a troubling thought interrupted her serenity. Could a venture into her own depths emerge, unearth questions she wasn't ready to face? The studio felt more alive that Saturday morning, the air laced with the scent of paint and hope. Carol arrived with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to embrace the chaos simmering beneath her skin. Emily was already there, her canvas a riot of colors that seemed to vibrate with energy. "Hey, look at this," Emily called out, excitement lighting up her face as she gestured toward her work. "I tried to combine a few of your dad's sketches with my style. It's kind of wild." Carol approached, her heart thrumming as she examined the blend of their artistic voices. Yet, as she scrutinized it, a prickling sense of apprehension clawed at her. Was this authentic or merely an imitation stretched across a surface? "It's incredible," she said, forcing a smile. "You've captured the essence of his designs really well." The compliment felt hollow, sliding off her tongue with little weight. She turned back to her blank canvas, a daunting expanse that reflected her internal turmoil. With each stroke she made, self-doubt gripped her tighter. Was her voice really emerging, or had she simply abandoned it? As the day progressed, they worked in silence, occasionally breaking it with small chatter or laughter. Carol decided to push through her insecurities, soaking up the energy that flowed between them. She painted with abandon, letting emotion splash across the canvas. Anger, joy, sorrow all melded into a colorful symphony. Yet every time she stepped back to evaluate her piece, she felt a chasm between her work and the ideas swelling within her. "Carol, this piece feels different," Emily noted, leaning closer to inspect the emerging shapes. "It's more visceral." Visceral. The word struck something deep within her. It wasn't just about paint or forms. It was raw and integral, a reflection of her very soul. Yet, as she stood there, pride knotted tight within her chest, a voice slithered into her mind. "But is it good enough? Do you think I should outline the figures?" Carol asked, betraying her vulnerability. Emily's brow furrowed slightly. "No. Let it breathe as it is. You don't need to define it so clearly. Feels organic. Keep going." Carol felt a spark of resistance rise. Did she even know how to keep going? The instinct to categorize and refine was deeply ingrained from years of traditional instruction, but here in this space was the potential for freedom. "Okay, I will," she said, her decision reverberating through her as she touched her brush to the canvas again. With each stroke, she unearthed layers of her creative self, peeling back the doubts built from self-criticism. She began to channel the emotional ebbs and flows of her experience, painting the struggles of every recollection, every encounter with grief, and every moment she hesitated to speak out. Hours melted into one another, and when they finally halted to step back and observe their creations, Carol felt an exhilaration she hadn't known in years. "It's like you've peeled off a skin," Emily said softly, awe coloring her voice. "This is truly you, Carol. Don't you see?" A wave of warmth flooded through her, mingled with an undercurrent of anxiety. Yes, this was her. But what did being Carol fully encompass? This newfound clarity didn't erase the shadows that loomed, nor did it render the fear of failure obsolete. As the day came to a close, Carol packed up her brushes, her heart still thundering with newfound possibilities. Yet, in the stillness of the studio, a familiar thread of anxiety unspooled in the back of her mind. Could this unearthing of identity truly withstand the world beyond this sanctuary? Just as she prepared to leave, Emily pulled her to the side, her voice low and earnest. "I see how hard you're trying. But what do you want this piece to say? That's where the magic lies." A question layered with a challenge. Carol processed the weight of it, grappling with the emotions swirling within her. The answer sloshed impatiently against her ribs, daring her to confront the truth buried deep in her mind. What if revealing her voice meant laying bare not just her artistry, but her entire existence? As the night air enveloped her, the studio felt like a portal to her potential. Yet the path forward seemed fraught with shadows. The journey to self-discovery had led her this far, but was she ready for the inevitable conflicts that lay ahead? With a deep breath, she stepped into the unknown, her heart aflame with both fear and fierce resolve. The moment to face not just herself but the challenges ahead loomed large. Could she take that next step into an unpredictable future where every brushstroke echoed the truth of who she was becoming? The air was thick with uncertainty as Carol navigated the streets back home, each passing block amplifying her internal conflict. The vibrant colors that had danced on her canvas now seemed a mockery of her unease. A sense of freedom bloomed, yes, but so did the nagging fear that she was on the precipice of exposing something too raw, too vulnerable. Did she possess the fortitude to share pieces of herself with a world that was often unkind? She entered her apartment, each footfall heavy with the weight of the decisions that lay before her. The brush strokes she had unleashed felt potent. Yet, wrapped inside layers of exhilaration was the nagging whisper of self-doubt. The challenge Emily had laid at her feet echoed in her mind. What did she want her artwork to say? A question that felt impossibly complex, yet deceptively simple. That night, seated at her kitchen table, she released the tension with rapid jotting. Words, phrases, and ideas coalesced into a half-formed narrative. As she wrote, her thoughts spilled forth with shocking clarity. Each line uncovered not just her artistic desires, but also the struggles buried underneath. The death of her father lingered like a shadow in her creative exploration. It was intertwined with the inspiration for her work, and yet, it beckoned her towards a chasm of grief that she hardly wanted to confront. "I am afraid," she scribbled, letting the ink drip with emotion. "Afraid that being true to myself means revealing everything." The truth could be the heaviest brush with darkness she would ever face. Days blurred into nights, and soon she found herself back at the studio with Emily, standing before her canvas once again. But this time things were different. They were sharper, clearer. The creative spontaneity she had embraced now felt like a tightrope walk. Every stroke required her to be acutely aware of the narrative she was beginning to craft. "Carol, you look intense today," Emily remarked one afternoon, catching her lost stare into the expanse of colors. "What are you thinking?" The question flared like a match against her maturing worthiness. What if, she hesitated, what if I want to tell the story of my father through this? To address loss and love in a way that feels honest? Emily's eyes lit up, and her smile turned conspiratorial. "Absolutely. This is what you should explore. Dare to make it personal. This is your canvas. Make it echo your experiences." Empowered by Emily's enthusiasm, Carol leaned into the challenge, offering herself permission to delve deep. Yet the deep-rooted anxiety clawed back relentlessly. Would people understand the depths of her relationship with her father? Would they be able to see the layers of pain and joy embedded in each stroke? As she worked feverishly, she discovered a new rhythm. It beckoned forth remnants of childhood memories intertwined with pain, the lingering laugh of her father, splashes of color mirroring shared afternoons spent in unspoken words. Each moment became a whisper through paint, a dialogue between her past and present. Yet despite the progress, that burrowing fear persisted. What if she laid herself bare only to find criticism instead of understanding? The risk felt palpable. She stood before her canvas. Understanding clarity only came when she confronted those fears. Buried so deeply, with a sigh of determination, she began to work through her anxieties. I will acknowledge my father not just as a distant echo, but as an ever-present guide. This is not just about me, she reflected, but about connection, what it truly means to be alive. As the strokes thickened and colors merged, something broke loose inside her. She could feel transformation flowing not only from her brush but from her heart. She was creating not just a painting, but an intricate map of her soul. Yet, just as she was about to take her next vital step, a collision of fears and excitement colluded within her as she pondered the unveiling of her work. How terrifying it would be to plunge into that unveiling with an audience, where her emotions could be laid bare for everyone to judge, where critique would be the price of authenticity. Could Carol truly embrace this leap into emotional exposure, knowing that her deepest wounds would be displayed on canvas for the world to see? The moment before the leap loomed ahead, shrouded in uncertainty, beckoning her to confront whatever waited on the other side. The studio buzzed with an electrifying energy that matched the afternoon sun pouring through the windows. Carol stood before her canvas, her heart racing. The vibrancy of her palette felt alive, yet each hue carried the weight of her decision. With every brushstroke, she was not just painting. She was rewriting the narrative of loss into something transformative. But doubt bubbled in the depths of her consciousness. What would her father think of this exploration? Would he see the love she poured into the layers, or merely the pain that had become part of her identities? These questions tightened around her thoughts, momentarily constricting the flow of creativity. Are you ready to reveal the story? Emily's voice pierced through the haze, her tone imbued with both excitement and some unnameable anticipation. Carol stepped back from the canvas, surveying her work. The images of her father, his features woven through the abstract forms, the playful colors representing joy shadowed by deep blues of grief, felt both profound and terrifying. I am not sure if I am, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Remember, this is your journey. You have the power to articulate your truth. Use that fear, channel it into the art. Emily's encouragement floated like a beacon, encouraging Carol to confront the anxieties that threatened to overwhelm her. With a deep breath, Carol picked up her brush, allowing her deeper emotions to filter through the fibers of the canvas. She directed her rage, sadness, and yearning into the artwork, morphing her apprehensions into striking visual metaphors. Each lash of paint became a slice into her vulnerability, yet carved away at the overwhelming fear of exposure. The very act of painting felt empowering, as if it was a bridge between the real world and the complex emotional narrative swirling within her. As days transitioned into weeks, Carol dedicated herself to this endeavor. She transformed the pale canvas into an explosion of color and emotion, layers upon layers capturing the intricate dance between remembrance and letting go. Yet as her deadline loomed, another confrontation awaited her. The local gallery was planning an exhibition for emerging artists, and Emily had suggested Carol apply. Let others see your journey, she had urged. But the thought of actual audience reaction nudged at her insecurities. It felt rash, almost reckless, to share a slice of her psyche with strangers. What if they didn't understand her, or worse, what if they judged her pain to be unworthy? Will they feel it? The complexities? She pondered aloud during one of their studio sessions. They might surprise you. Sharing your truth is the most relatable art, Emily said. Yet Carol remained torn. The urge to unveil her heart at the exhibit battled against the clutches of fear stifling her often elated spirit. The final touches on her painting were complete, yet a heaviness settled into her bones with the thought of submitting it. It wasn't merely about exposure. It was about laying raw emotions on display, allowing her inner narrative to align with public perceptions. The prospect seemed unfathomable still. She glanced at her clock as it ticked closer to the submission deadline. What if, In choosing to expose her vulnerability, Carol could change the conversation surrounding grief and healing. Would that transform the risk into something fiercer and bolder? In that moment, with trembling hands, she reached for her phone, ready to take the first step beyond the safe confines of her cloistered world. And preparing to share, she realized the act of creating had changed her. Perhaps the unveiling didn't equate to defeat but liberation. But as she typed her submission email, a haunting thought broke through. Was she truly ready to open herself to potential misunderstanding? Could she take this final step knowing the power of her fears? The screen blinked as she hovered her finger over the send button. A moment suspended in time. The imminent leap that awaited forced a question to surface, one that demanded to be faced. Could the unveiling be the catalyst for a deeper connection, or merely another reminder of solitude, masked under the guise of artistry? Carol's finger trembled above the glowing screen, the weight of her decision hanging heavily in the air. With each tick of the clock, the intensity of her internal struggle deepened, revealing layers of her psyche she had yet to confront. It was more than just a submission, it was an excavation of self, and she felt raw and unprotected. The lure of liberation ignited a flicker of courage within her. Could this really be the transformative leap she yearned for? Just before she finally pressed send, doubt gnawed at her. Who did she think she was, thinking her story deserved an audience? The risk seemed insurmountable, yet the pulsating urge to be seen, to be understood, ignited an insatiable flame within her. Suddenly, the tiny studio that had been her sanctuary felt like an echo chamber, amplifying her doubts. The once vibrant colors now blurred under the weight of indecision. But in the dim composite of her fears, a clearer realization emerged. This was about more than just her, wasn't it? Carol envisioned her father, the passionate artist who taught her the value of honest expression. If he could witness her courage, might he be proud? With a final breath that felt heavy with significance, she pressed send. A wave of vulnerability washed over her, as though she had stepped into uncharted waters. But perhaps this was where true growth awaited. What had changed? Perhaps it was not only the act of sharing her art, but the acceptance of embracing discomfort. Days passed, and every glance at her email stirred a whirlpool of anticipation. In those moments, she was acutely aware of the internal shifts occurring within her. She had opened herself up with all its rawness, and realized that in doing so, she was learning to trust her own narrative. The reflections in her artwork began to deepen. She was not just presenting pieces, she was offering pieces of herself. But liberation was a double-edged sword, and as the submission deadline passed, anxiety emerged anew. What if the feedback wasn't positive? What if the audience couldn't connect with her journey? She threw herself into her painting, channeling her fears into the canvas. Each stroke evolved, becoming a visual diary of her emotional evolution, one that mirrored her internal battle. Emily, plastic cup of coffee in hand, watched her with a knowing expression. The fear won't ever fully disappear, Carol. Not unless you embrace it, she encouraged during another collaborative session. Carol was learning this truth firsthand, recognizing that avoidance only caused more pain. Each brushstroke became a confrontation of her reluctance, an excavation of the very fears she tried to sidestep. Yet in her heart a deeper conflict brewed. She began to question if she had truly tapped into the depths of her mission, or whether she was merely skimming the surface. With each passing day, the fear of being misunderstood loomed larger, yet strangely empowering. She mentioned this bittersweet paradox to Emily as they navigated through layers of paint. Being vulnerable is terrifying, but it feels strangely freeing. Doesn't it? Absolutely. Art becomes an anchor when the world feels overwhelming. But you have to allow it to take you to places you'd often avoid, Emily replied, her voice steady but laced with urgency. Carol's imagination drifted off to the opening night of the exhibition, a mingling of fear and hope. Would they sense the richness of her struggle, the subtleties of loss woven through color? Or would they reduce her experience to a simple narrative of sadness, stripping away its multidimensionality? The moment of reckoning approached. As she worked late into the nights following her submission, she acknowledged the truth that had been brewing beneath her enthusiasm and doubt. This was not merely about art. It was her awakening, a metamorphosis from the ashes of her insecurities. With the exhibition looming just a week away, she faced the undeniable fact that this was about confronting external judgment but equally essential, transcending the limitations she imposed on herself. Could she stand up and showcase her work, fully embracing its essence, despite the wounds it represented? The pressure mounted, and in that kaleidoscope of emotion, Carol found herself at the edge of discovery. As the closing hours of her studio approached, she realized this was not about seeking validation. It was a declaration of her presence and purpose. The night before the exhibit opened, as shadows danced across her creations, a sudden determination surged through her like a river flowing forcefully. Whatever the outcome, she was ready to uncover herself entirely, to step into the light. The moment of truth loomed, and with it a question pulsated in her mind. Would she have the strength to claim her narrative against the backdrop of the world? The evening of the exhibition opened with a nervous flurry, and Carol stood in front of her pieces as if facing a battalion of unrelenting critics. Each canvas represented her journey, every drip, stroke and color choice a milestone in her evolution. Yet a gnawing tension twisted in her stomach. She took a deep breath, inhaling the mixture of varnish and acrylic, sometimes rich and invigorating, other times suffocating. She saw guests filtering in, their silhouettes framed by the entrance light. Shoulders back, eyes forward. She reminded herself that humility could coexist with pride. This was her work. She had poured herself into every piece, and now she was vulnerable to the world's judgments. It was both exhilarating and terrifying as the first group clustered around one of her boldest paintings, a deep burgundy canvas that seemed to pulse with energy. Carol's heart raced. They leaned in, whispering, sharing thoughts that echoed in her own mind. Would they truly understand the fire behind her brushstrokes? Or would they interpret it as just another abstract narrative devoid of meaning? The overwhelming fear of the unknown gripped her, yet the flicker of her earlier courage began to lampoon her anxiety, illuminating the path ahead. Emily approached from the side, an encouraging smile brightening her face. They're connecting with your work, Carol. Look how engaged they are. Using the moment as an anchor, Carol focused on the conversations flowing around her. The camaraderie among the attendees offered her comfort. They were fellow seekers of meaning, much like herself. Amidst the chatter, one particular voice cut through. A tall woman, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, stood voicing interpretations, her eyes wide with enthusiasm. This piece speaks to the chaos of loss and rebirth, she said passionately. Each word landed like a spark, igniting a warmth within Carol. This was not simply a one-way street. She had initiated dialogue with her art, and the connection felt empowering. Yet the gnaw of skepticism still lurked within her. The thought that maybe it was all an illusion, that perhaps her work had been reduced to mere words without understanding the heart. This continued to haunt her. Would there come a moment when someone's interpretation reflected back her own truth? As the evening unfolded, more guests approached her. They studied her work, asking questions she hadn't anticipated. Where did the inspiration come from? What emotions did she feel while creating? Carol answered eagerly, her passion bubbling over. Each question drew her deeper into exploration, confronting thoughts she still battled with over her artistic worthiness. But then came an unexpected challenge when a man with a critical eye scrutinized her most intimate piece, a palette of dark blues and muted grays that symbolized her experiences with grief. He pursed his lips and shook his head slowly. I just don't get it. Feels too muddled, almost overdone. Simplicity has more power, he declared. His voice dripped with a condescending authority, and in that moment an old refrain echoed in her mind. Perhaps he was right. Carol felt a jolt of disappointment wash over her. Was she merely playing at being an artist? A pretender in a realm where genuine voices thrived? In response to that thought, something shifted within her. Rather than shrink back, a fire ignited. She had to confront not just this man's criticism but her own lingering insecurities. Her pulse quickened as she acknowledged the deep-rooted belief that she could never be enough. Art is subjective, she offered, her voice steady despite the tumult inside. What may feel muddled to you could represent profound complexity for someone else. There it was, her determination forming a shield, dulled edges sharpening. As the evening continued and conversations swelled, Carol began to see fragments of her own story reflected in the words of others. Questions turned to expressions of empathy. Reflections flooded back to her in different hues. Acceptance flourished alongside uncertainty, and she felt the limits of her self-imposed boundaries begin to expand in her heart. She knew she was teetering on a precipice of transformation. With every interaction, she was gathering strength, reshaping her narrative. As the final strands of the exhibition night unfolded, an exhilarating clarity emerged. This exhibition was not just about her art, it was a declaration of her resilience outside. A cool breeze brushed her skin, and she stepped into it with the faintest gasp of realization. The moment of truth had unveiled itself. She could define her narrative beyond external validation. But would the newfound determination endure once the applause faded? And in the quiet shadows of her studio, alone with her thoughts again, would she battle with those fears anew? She stared into the sky, a flicker of uncertainty mingling with possibility. With each new brushstroke, she had accepted her narrative as an ongoing journey, but was she ready for the next chapter? The vulnerable silence echoed profoundly in her mind. The question hung in the air. What awaited her in the depths she had yet to explore? The morning light poured through the windows of her studio, casting intricate patterns across the floor. Carol stood before her easel, a palette of colors igniting her canvas. The lingering exhilaration from the exhibition buzzed within her, pulsating with the promise of new beginnings. Yet, beneath that excitement lurked a whisper of doubt, struggling to gain volume amidst her optimism. The critique from the man at the gallery clawed at her thoughts, a malignant voice refusing to fade. What if simplicity truly did hold more power? What if by striving for complexity, she had veered away from the very essence of art? She shook her head, trying to dispel the doubts like cobwebs, but still they clung. Her first stroke came with hesitation, a cautious dab of teal that seemed to challenge her resolve. This piece was not mere exploration. It was an assertion, a testament to her narrative, her journey to understanding herself through art. Yet as she layered color upon color, her hand faltered, and the paint dripped, blending into unfamiliar shades of disappointment. Taking a step back, she scrutinized the emerging form on her canvas. Was she truly expressing her intent? Or was she embellishing a reality that didn't exist? Each brushstroke echoed her internal conflict, pushing back against her intentions while circling her fears. A brow creased in determination, she resolved not to give in to self-doubt. In a moment of clarity, she recalled the woman from the exhibition whose words had sparked warmth. Loss and rebirth. Carol set her jaw, a firm decision making roots in her mind. Perhaps it was that complexity that resided not in chaotic strokes, but in the deep journey of processing emotions, her own and those of others. This was her strength, the very essence of her artistry. With renewed vigor, she began layering her work more deliberately. As colors intertwined, emboldened by raw emotion, she allowed herself to confront her grief rather than hide it. The murky palette took on life. Blues transformed into shimmering depths, the grays softened, then twisted into lighter hues, suggesting movements beyond sorrow. It was a conversation as much with herself as it was with the canvas. As the hours slipped by, moments of clarity punctured her central doubts. It was not about replicating simplicity. It was about weaving her experiences into something profound. She was not merely creating art. She was telling stories of resilience and rebirth. These thoughts flowed like paint from her strokes. Inspiration ignited her resolve. Yet, as she stepped back to absorb the whole, a familiar anxiety clawed at her resolve again. Would this piece resonate with others? Would it stand as testament to her growth? Or would it crumble under critical gaze? Suddenly, the studio fell silent, amplifying the sound of her own breath. She glanced at her phone, the silence broken by a single notification, a message from Emily. Let us plan a critique session. I want to bring in a few artists for feedback. It'll be good for you. The invitation hung in the air like a challenge. Would feedback validate her efforts or leave her raw and questioning? An uncomfortable knot formed in her stomach. The thought of exposing her new work to another round of scrutiny filled her with foreboding. But this was her opportunity. The chance to measure her growth against the very fears she had already begun to unravel. Could she be open to the opinions of others, while remaining true to her own vision? The battle lines were drawn, her heart racing at the thought of interplay between vulnerability and strength. This was not a simple decision to make, it was a defining one. As she considered her response, something stirred deep within her, an urge not to avoid vulnerability, but to embrace it. Was this the next evolution of her artistic journey? With the weight of anticipation pressing down, she poised herself to answer the invitation that could either solidify her path or shake her foundations. The choice lay ahead, stark against the backdrop of her evolution. Would she dare to expose the most intimate layers of her journey? And would the insights gained from others lead her to a deeper understanding? Or would they unravel her newfound sense of self? Days melded into weeks, and Carol found herself transformed. The critique session that once seemed daunting became an opportunity for collaborative exploration. Artists gathered, their diverse perspectives creating an atmosphere electric with anticipation. As Carol positioned her artwork beneath the soft studio lights, a mix of vulnerability and determination coursed through her. This wasn't merely her display. It was a testament to her evolution, a collision of grief, resilience, and rebirth. The journey she'd embarked upon over the summer was unfolding as a narrative she never quite envisioned for herself. "Wow, this piece is striking," an artist murmured, leaning in closer to assess the intricate layers. "There's a palpable intensity in your use of color." Carol's heart swelled. Validation was bittersweet, and yet she was met with genuine insight. With each observation, she noticed something remarkable: her work didn't exist in a vacuum. It resonated with others, sparking conversations about their own journeys through sorrow and joy. "Your father's influence is woven beautifully into your expression," another attendee noted, and as she spoke, Carol felt an awakening. No longer was she just the daughter in the shadow of an artist. She was reclaiming her voice, celebrating it right alongside her father's legacy. "Thank you," Carol replied, her voice steady. "I wanted to communicate the complexities of loss, the colors of pain mixed with those of hope." As the session progressed, she began to respond to critiques with newfound courage. When challenged, she didn't shrink or become defensive. Instead, she invited discussion, using each encounter as a stepping stone toward deeper understanding, not only of her art but of herself. "Art is more than visual. It's visceral," she articulated, drawing connections between her experiences and those shared by the group. "Through grief I've found expression. I've rebirthed my voice." As she spoke, the sense of empowerment flooded over her. The act of sharing her thoughts affirmed her growth. When the session concluded, several attendees approached her, gushing over her talent. They were eager to collaborate to share future projects. But what struck Carol most was the recognition in their eyes not merely of her work, but of her journey. In that moment, she realized the profound depth of her transformation. She had conquered the crippling loneliness that had threatened to consume her after George's passing. The fear of being irrelevant had dissipated. She was not merely existing, she was contributing to a conversation, redefining presence within her artistry. Over the next few weeks, Carol maintained this momentum. As she painted, each session invigorated her. She felt a coil of energy running through her brush, bold strokes emerging with clarity and intention. She honed in on a new series, capturing the cycles of life, loss, and renewal, layering textures until the canvas seeped with emotion. Recognition followed. Work was exhibited not just in local galleries, but also selected for a prominent art show. Fellow artists began to cite her pieces as reflective of a shared experience, an articulation of the layered complexities of human emotion. Carrie was no longer the woman overshadowed by grief. She had evolved into a confident artist, assertive in her narrative. She recognized that vulnerability bore strength. The burdens she once perceived as limits had now transformed into sources of inspiration. Closing a chapter she once thought irrevocably marked by loss, Carol instead felt buoyed by the realization that each brushstroke captured not just an identity forged in grief, but an expansive vision reaching beyond it. As she stood before her completed works during the opening night of her art show, a sweeping wave of satisfaction overtook her. Family flowed through the crowd, friends admired her pieces, and strangers discussed her work, their eyes alight with understanding. They intertwined admiration with shared sorrow. It was spirit-filling. With each new conversation Carol engaged in, her understanding of herself morphing further, she realized. She had conquered the shadows that once threatened her voice. She had transformed her grief into artistry, honing it into something palpable and relatable. This was not merely a personal victory. It was an exploration of identity, a celebration of rebirth. Empowered, centered, and openly embracing her story, Carol radiated confidence, standing firm in her established place as an artist. Sensing the profound fulfillment swelling within her, Carol promised herself to share not just her artistry but her journey, urging others to venture beyond their own shadows. She had embarked on this path to uncover herself. Now she was committed to inspire others to do the same. Her self-renewal journey was a testament to resilience and courage, turning every moment of trepidation into a bridge toward empowerment. This was the moment. A clear declaration to live amidst colors, not simply to exist but to flourish authentically. Now it's your turn. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let them witness the power of transformation. You need to subscribe now, and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.